you?
I'm good. So nice to see you.
Likewise, likewise,
हाँ, बहुत
likewise.
आपकी तरफ 5 बज रहे हैं कराची में?
That's right. It's just after 5
After 5.
in the evening,
हम्म
5 p.m.
हम्म यहाँ पे 7 a.m. है and it's still dark in Toronto.
You're looking pretty nice and fresh for a 7 o'clock morning appointment, and I suppose it's the coffee which is doing it.
Coffee is doing it, and then I jumped out of bed at around 6:15. मैंने कहा जल्दी से तैयार हूँ सब कुछ because I know how punctual you are, and of course we had our meeting. अच्छा वो मैं यही सोच रही थी few years back when I had come, I think it was 2 years back when I had come to Karachi, and हम लोग बैठे हुए थे सुबह में चाय पी रहे थे, you were reading your dawn, and somehow I don't know how we started talking about your childhood and how you were in boarding school, Marike, and the stories that you were telling were so amazing, and by the time मैंने अपना ये phone निकाला record करने के लिए, most of it was done. So I at that time I had decided that I'm going to preserve these stories and record these stories. So do you think we can talk about your
Yeah, why
life?
not? Of course,
Yeah.
that's the purpose of this conversation that we're having.
जी.
But I thought you also wanted to know about my early childhood and how did we get here, or do you want me to jump straight to that school?
Nee, let's start with the early childhood.
Right. So if that's how you want to do it, then uh, my early childhood, let's say my first memory,
जी.
conscious memory, is of the time when we were in the Air Force station. It was called then Air Force Station Moripur, which is now called PF Base Masroor.
Masroor.
That is where my father, Miaji,
जी.
got his first posting after he got commissioned in the Pakistan Air Force.
Hmm.
So my first memory is of that house where we were living in, and I became conscious of my siblings. And but there was one sibling which was missing, which nobody told me about. So we were four. I was the youngest at that time. But later on, I came to know that we were actually five. And one was not amongst us at that point in time. And these are early days about. So we were four. I was the youngest at that time. But later on, I came to know that we were actually five. And one was not amongst us at that point in time. And these are early days after partition.
Hmm.
And so I'm talking about probably 1950, 51. I'm not very sure. And then one day, there was a lot of excitement in the house, and uh, hustle and bustle, and it appeared that something big was going to happen that day. And suddenly I found myself sitting in some kind of a vehicle. And the next memory I have is that we are at Karachi's seaport. And obviously, there are a lot of people there, and there's a lot of hustle and bustle, and there's a big ship which is docked somewhere in the background. And these are just flashes. It's not a continuous and a clear memory. And my parents, that's Miaji, whom we all lovingly call Miaji, my father, and Amma, whom we all, my mother, whom we all lovingly call Amma. They're standing there, and I'm clutching their hand. And then suddenly there's a mem saab. A
Hmm.
mem saab is a Pakistani term for uh, an English woman. It's a Desi term for an English woman. And remember, again, these are early days after partition, so the Brits are still around. And we see a lady coming towards us with a big, wide-brimmed straw hat and a flowery dress like a frock, and white shoes, and very fair, and looked very much English. And she walked up, and then she suddenly screamed and said, Mia, Amma, don't you recognize me? Aap mujhe pehchan nahi rahe hain.
Mm.
And they got shocked. They said, Sitara, is that you? And then there was a lot of hugging and crying and kissing. And then I said, who's this person? And nobody again remembered to tell me that this is an elder sister who wasn't with us when we first came over from India to Pakistan. So later on, I got to know that she was indeed my second eldest sister. The eldest one was Saida Baji. The second one was Tara Baji, who I'm
My
just talking
mom.
about, who was your mom. The third amongst the siblings was my brother, elder brother, Ale Ahmed. God bless him. He's a shaheed. He was a major in the army, and he died very bravely and courageously in 1971 war. He was in the tanks in the Armored Corps, 31 Cavalry. And then there was my sister Nasreen, who was my rival. We always used to have arguments because she was just immediately my senior. And then, of course, there was me. So Sitara Baji joined us, and we became 5 siblings again. Well, that's about it as far as these early childhood memories are concerned. I would like to, though, mention something about, I don't remember the part because I was born in Aligarh. Okay, that is pre-partition. And Aligarh, as you know, is very famous in the subcontinent because one of the best and finest institutions, education institutions, especially for Muslims, is located in Aligarh. It's called the Aligarh Muslim University. And it was founded by Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, another iconic figure in subcontinental history. So, and by the way, that's where Miaji, my father, your grandfather, he's an alumnus of Aligarh University, and I'm very proud of that.
Really, I didn't know that.
Oh, okay. So he did his master's in history from Aligarh Muslim University, and remember, we are talking. This must have been in the early 40s or mid 40s when he did his master's. And how many people, especially Muslims in the subcontinent, were achieving that level of education? So he did that, and virtually on his own. He used to earn on the side and pay for his tuition. So I'm very proud of him in that sense. So when partition came, somebody, one of his acquaintances and colleagues and friend who was already in that part of the subcontinent, which became Pakistan, and who was at that time already a commissioned officer in the Royal Pakistan Air Force in the Education Corps, wrote to Miaji in India that if you wish to, you could migrate into this new country called Pakistan and join in the education branch of the Royal Pakistan Air Force, because this is just being set up and they need a lot of educated people to train and educate the newly inducted people who would be officers and airmen in the Air Force. So, and this is anecdotal because this is narrated to me by my father. Okay. So, not that I witnessed it. So he did come alone
for the first time.
And joined, got selected, and then joined the Air Force Academy at Rasalpur and completed his training successfully and was commissioned as a pilot officer. Now, this is a big thing in those days, and when there were no native officers in pre-partition, or very few native officers in
Mm.
pre-partition, and so to become an officer
Mm.
in the Air Force was, I'm sure, a very big achievement at that point.
Mm.
And but once he got commissioned, then um, he called for us,
Mm.
and Amma and four siblings came over to Pakistan. Now, this is narrated to me by Amma,
Mm.
that they came, of course, when all the violence and the civil
Mm.
unrest and the bloodshed of which immediately
Mm.
preceded and followed the partition had by then subsided and things were under control.
Mm.
I think this must have been in
30.
49, 48, 49, 50, around that time. I'm not sure about the exact year.
Yeah.
But Amma said that we came to Pakistan from Aligarh. And of course, here I must mention the person who was in charge of this entire migration process was my chacha, Inike Zille Hasnain Chacha, who was, I mean, my mother was forever, ever grateful to Zille Hasnain Chacha for having escorted her and her four children,
Mm.
the fifth one I'll talk about later, from Aligarh. And he didn't bring us from the obvious route, which is from Punjab.
Right.
And he brought us through Rajasthan. And
Oh.
this is narrated to me by Amma.
Mm.
And of course, there was a point from where they had to get off the train in India, and they crossed over the border on camels, because Amma was really
Yeah.
fast. You know, I mean, it's sort
Right.
of something which remained in her mind, because Rajasthan is a desert area, as you
Right.
know. So they crossed over in a camel and then picked up the train here in Pakistani side of the Rajasthan sector. And then I don't know where did exactly. I think they went first to Lahore,
Mm.
and after that, then they eventually. And all this time,
Mm.
it was Zille Hasnain Chacha who was looking up, because Mia was already in the Air Force. He
Right.
couldn't have come.
Right.
And another interesting anecdote that Amma tells me is that told us is that when they were migrating, or when they were crossing the border, they were obviously Indian. There were customs and immigration officials and so on and so forth. And Amma was trying to bring as much of her household goods from India into Pakistan.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
And so she had her carpets, and she had a little bit of furniture, whatever good furniture she had, some and crockery and other household effects. And she had curtains also. And those curtains had brass rings.
Hmm.
So the Indian custom women thought that these brass rings are actually gold bangles.
Okay.
And they snatched them from Amma
Hmm.
and kept them with themselves.
Hmm.
And Amma was relieved, because
Hmm.
probably that they left the rest of her little trinkets that she was carrying, some rings, or maybe some small necklace. They left that alone. They got so fascinated with these brass curtain
Open
rings.
rings.
So that's about it as far as that partition thing is concerned. And so then, okay. So now, where was Sitara Baji? Why was she arriving at the Karachi port?
Hmm.
So it turned out that there was a very, very important figure in our family, and we all called her Mummy, but she was actually Dr. Nevis Gill. And she was an Anglo-American, Anglo-Indian doctor who was um residing in Aligarh. And
Hmm.
she was on very good terms with my nani and
Okay.
Amma's mother.
Hmm.
And In fact, she had a very big house, a very big bungalow, which is still there, exists even today, on Marriott Road, I think it's called.
Mm,
And again, this is by word of mouth from Amma and Sitara Baji.
mm,
It was a big house with lots of banyan trees and fruit trees. And Amma and her mother used to, I don't know what was the arrangement, but they were also living in that because mummy was single. She wasn't married
right.
and she needed to keep a family. And I think Amma and her mother were living there.
Mm,
And eventually, I think for some time, we also lived uh, in mummy's house.
mm,
Mummy became very, very fond of Sitara. So when partition took place, and eventually when we were relocating to
mm,
Pakistan, Mummy decided also to come to Pakistan.
mm.
Although I mean she was an Anglo-Indian, she could have stayed back.
Right
She had
there. Yeah.
great practice in Aligarh, and I'm told that she was very famous there,
Mm,
and obviously uh, very well received in the most elite circles
mm,
of that area, and all the Nawabs and the Rajas, and,
mm,
the big feudal landlords would send their huge limousines like Rolls Royce and whatever else they used to drive in those days to pick her up whenever she was required to make a house call for their ladies, for the women folk. The women folk were in Parda, they wouldn't
mm,
come to her. So mummy would have to go and attend to them, including deliveries at their homes. And they would send their big limos with
mm,
chauffeurs.
mm,
So mummy told Mia and Amma, apparently, I mean, and all of this is, of course, narrated to me much later down, that uh, while we, the rest of us, could move to Pakistan, we had to leave. They had to leave Sitara Baji behind with
mm,
Mummy because Mummy wanted to go to Europe,
mm.
and she said, "I'll go to Europe and I'll take Sitara with me, and uh, and then from Europe I'll come directly to Pakistan."
How nice. Yes.
So we left for Pakistan,
Mm,
leaving Sitara Baji behind with Mummy.
mm.
And apparently, Mummy and Sitara Baji went away to
To
England
your.
for a very, I think, for a 6 months
Okay.
or maybe more in Europe. Um, and they toured all the places and then came back to Pakistan. And that is when I received, I was one of the
We-
receiving party, reception party when they arrived back. And Mummy stayed with us for a while.
For a while.
Initially, she stayed in the Hotel Metropole, which was a very, very uh,
Prestigious.
prestigious location, and she carried on her practice from there. And then eventually, when Meji got posted out of Karachi
Mm,
and went to, I think we went to Murray, Rotopa,
mm.
that's when Mummy moved with us.
Oh,
And she stayed with us for a while.
okay.
And then I don't know what happened. She left for
So,
some other place.